Welcome to week 4 of the Seagate Gaming Academy, powered by Northern Shield Academy. I am Zykmoa, a professional Fortnite player for Serenity Esports. This week we will be talking about map understanding and rotations, a very important part of competitive Fortnite. Although the map is always changing season by season or even week by week, there are still base concepts we need to remember. And these base concepts apply to any version of the map, so season changes and other map changes will not make these concepts any less valuable. In fact, you can even apply these concepts to the old map in Chapter 1, and this goes to show you just how timeless these concepts are. They will continue to exist into the future, and so learning these concepts now will continue to help you for a very long time in your competitive Fortnite endeavors. So let's get right into it. Let's first talk about Deadside. So what is Deadside? Deadside is the part of the map that is going to be the least congested due to multiple reasons, and the main reason that a deadside might exist is because it is the furthest point away from the center of the map. So any point on the edges of the map will often be noted as deadside. This is the place that the least amount of people are going to be congested towards. So if you want to find a spot where you and your trio can chill and take a breather and not run into as many people, you want to play on the outside edges of the map, and that's often the deadside. This can often give you an advantage because you're on the part of the map that has the least conflict, right? And you're going to have the least likelihood of getting killed. So try to take advantage of deadside whenever you see an opportunity. Usually this will be when you've taken care of your storm surge, if there's any, and you have good loot. So make sure you have that stuff out of the way first and you're in a good state to play endgame, and then you can position you and your team in a really good spot to not fight anyone. So next, let's talk about terrain. This is a very important factor in positioning your team, and one of the most important at that. So of course, there's the most obvious ones where you want to position your team on top of a mountain when possible. Having mountain and high elevations, it gives you more information to work off of, but also it gives you height advantage. And having height advantage, as we know in Fortnite, is a very, very important advantage to have. But terrain extends past high ground and mountains. We can almost categorize the types of terrains that exist around the map. For example, in between holly hedges and sweaty sands, it's a very flat grassland area, right? So if the zone ever pulls in that direction and it pulls in that area, you then know that you need to play in a certain way so that you have the advantage on your side. For example, let's use the example that I just mentioned. The area in between holly hedges and sweaty sands, how it's very flat, there's little cover, it's all that grassland. You want to play towards center zone because it's going to be very, very difficult rotating in deeper in like third or fourth zone, because a lot of people are going to be able to hold you and prevent you from getting into zone. So if you ever have a chance to, let's say in first or second zone, just play towards the center, by all means do this in this sort of area. The same applies for water zones. If you can try to get towards the center and get across the water earlier, it's going to be a lot better for you so that you don't have to get across down the road, maybe third or fourth zone when there's a lot of people, because trying to swim across the water and being held by people is very, very dangerous. Another example I can give you of this is almost the opposite. This is the grassy area, is a sand area that exists, or in any area that has a ton of cover, like Misty Meadows or an area with a lot of trees, right? So in these sorts of areas, it doesn't hurt to play edge compared to dead center, because later on, if you don't pull zone, you can then rotate in using the cover of the trees or the cover of the buildings in Misty Meadows and take advantage of that. So you really just want to think about how many lines of sights are there in the terrain that I'm about to play in, right? And what does that mean for how I should be playing the zones? Usually the less cover there is, the more center you want to play it earlier. And it's more forgiving to play edge on a zone that has a lot of cover to rotate with. So if you just categorize terrains in these sort of two categories, you know, a lot of cover versus not a lot of cover at all, it makes it very easy for you to decide where you should be positioned with your team. So let's move on. We spoke last week about team roles, and this continues into this week in how we communicate on when and how to rotate as a team. You can rewatch that video from the link in the description. But we can talk about a little bit more on the habits that you should have as a team. These little habits, such as making sure that you're pinging every time you're talking about something. For example, it's preferable that you ping something rather than saying, okay, he's southwest, right? Because your teammates are going to take a lot of time to try to figure out where southwest is exactly in the heat of the moment. And pinging is extremely fast way to give a visual indicator to your teammates about what you're talking about. So that's one thing. But also a good tip for communication is to always talk about what your intent is, not necessarily what you're doing in the moment. So it's a lot better to say, let's push this guy, rather than saying I'm on this guy or I'm pushing this guy. So you're sort of telling your teammates what to do, but you're also giving them a heads up ahead of time. And this is really important because you're then giving them time to react to what you're saying and also follow up on you. It's a little unpractical for your first comm to be, I'm in their box, or I'm fighting this guy. Rather, your communication should have something to do with what you're about to do rather than what you're doing. So lastly, let's move on and talk about dropping in a structured way. So I think all teams should have a sort of plan around their drop spot and what the most important places are to control in your drop spot. For example, retail row, doghouse, right? You really want to control that central position that cuts retail row into the left half and the right half. And you really want to make sure that you fight for that position, right? You have at least one person dropping for that, and if necessary, you have two people dropping for if you see someone contesting that one person, right? You should sort of have a plan for that. Usually each POI has one or two very important places to control that if you do control, you immediately start with an advantage in the fight. For example, Lazy Lake, that center main building, is extremely important to control, the one that's the tallest. If you control that building, you have lines of sight on everyone, and you get the info for your team on what the other team is doing. And you know, these sorts of places exist on every single POI, and it's very important to first identify what that building is or that place and make sure that you and your team do your best to fight for it and control that building. So make sure you and your team rehearse the loot paths that you guys will have so that you and your team are able to loot the POI in a very fast fashion, in the case that you're uncontested, for example. So it's really important that you and your team are able to loot as much as possible in a very short period of time, because that gives you more time to rotate to first zone and position well. And as you know, in trios, positioning, as we talked about earlier, is extremely important. So make sure you and your team have got these efficiencies down. And the way you do this, by the way, just search up lootlake.info on Google and draw all these lines to identify the paths that you and your trio mates are going to take. You can plan out everything from the beginning and make sure that you have all the efficiencies down and make sure that you loot your POI in the shortest amount of time. This can set your trio up for success. And once you have that done, guys, you want to make sure that you're not leaving your POI too early. Make sure that even if the zone's on the other side of the map, you're looting well. Make sure that you have everything that you need. You have good shields, you have good mobility if mobility exists in the current meta, and make sure that you have as much looted as possible, because the more loot that you have as a trio, the more well off you're going to be, the more mistakes you can afford to make and still be in the game. For example, if you don't have a lot of shields because you rush the looting and you try to rotate too early, you're going to be in trouble if one of your teammates gets sniped off the relay. And this happens all the time, right? People on their trio will get sniped and there's nothing you can do about it. It's just complete chance sometimes. But if you have a ton of shields, you can sort of absorb these mistakes and still be in the game and sort of fix these mistakes without having to do too much, if that makes sense. I've found that the games that I don't have a lot of shields, like one mistake will just end our game just like that. But if we spend our time, we loot well, and we make sure that our trio economy, if you will, is really good, then we can make a ton of mistakes actually and still be fine. So you want to sort of set yourself up for that. So make sure you're looting well. That's it for now, guys. If you have any questions, just hop in the Discord server and be sure to DM me. I'm more than open to answering any questions that you guys might have. Thank you for watching this week's video. I'm Zykmoa. You can follow me at Zykmoa TV on Twitter and Zykmoa on all of their social medias. And be sure to check out Northern Shield Academy on all social medias. I will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.
Hi everyone, it's Seagate again. Welcome to week 4. When it comes to PCIe Gen 4 SSD, our SSDs are backwards compatible, but why waste performance speed? We recommend pairing it with the MSI B550 motherboards that has the Gen 4 Lightning M.2 slots that can get up to 64 gigabytes per second. Wow, that's fast. We'll see you next week.